This is DW News Africa. Coming up on the program, as European countries try to restrict migration from Africa, are they also covertly funding human rights abuses? And a new investigation says EU-funded operations are moving migrants en masse and dumping them in dangerous border areas in the Sahara. But other funds from Europe are aimed at inviting some Africans to take up much-needed jobs. We meet some prospects in Kenya. The president of the Democratic Republic of Congo finally appoints a new cabinet. We'll find out what this means for the country. And the Nigerian actor hoping to prove doubters wrong about what he can achieve living with albinism. Hello, I'm Tomi Oladipo. It's good to have you with us. The European Union is spending hundreds of millions of euros in Africa to curb irregular migration. Part of the scheme involves working with African governments to stop the migrants before they set off. But a new investigation published by the news consortium Lighthouse Reports says these deals are actually causing harm. The report accuses the EU of being complicit in human rights abuses and the covert mass expulsion of migrants, often dumping them in remote and dangerous border areas in the Sahara Desert.
Forced onto buses and trucks and driven from the North African coastline into the desert. The Lighthouse Reports investigation says migrants are being dumped without food and water and that vehicles the EU paid for are being used to do it. The EU's response was defensive.
Our national partners remain sovereign states, and they continue to be in control of their national forces. By the way, they also agree to cooperate on the basis of the respect for international law and human rights. This is what we're trying to work for, and this is why we remain engaged on the ground.
In the past year, the EU has signed cooperation deals worth hundreds of millions of euros with Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Mauritania, and others, partly aimed at getting them to halt migration into Europe. Rights groups say the deals go against Europe's own values.
This deal is empowering repressive regimes that are inherently unstable. It's undermining the integration between Africa because it's leading to hostility between North African countries and Sub-Saharan African countries as well. Beyond this, it's sadly fueling a lot of xenophobia. It's fueling a lot of anti-black racism that we have been seeing.
The question is whether the EU's deals even work to close off the routes from the African coast. Experts like Alberto Horst Neidhardt say they aren't stopping departures.
Rather than completely sealing the borders of the EU, preventing altogether irregular migration, oftentimes they redirect flows elsewhere.
There remain 6 main routes of migration into the EU. The EU has beefed up its border guard presence on the land routes, causing a drop in arrivals there over the past 2 years. But the number of people using the sea routes from Africa has risen dramatically again, especially on the most dangerous route from West Africa across the Atlantic to Spain's Canary Islands. The EU is known to want to sign further deals with other African states, which include clauses allowing it to send people back.
Cooperation on return, taking back their nationals, is one of the most controversial and divisive domestic issues for these governments. So in this sense, likely they will ask for something back from the EU, which can be political, it can be financial.
Over 380,000 people entered the EU on smugglers' routes last year, and the percentage of them coming from sub-Saharan Africa is increasing significantly every year.
Let's speak now to Andrei Popoviciu, an investigative journalist who was part of the team that produced the report for Lighthouse Reports. Welcome to the program, Andrei. What stood out for you in the investigation?
Well, there's 2 things. I think first, the scale and similarity of the operations in all 3 countries was really jarring. You have hundreds and hundreds of people bussed every week out to desert, border, and remote areas. And that pretty much similarly happens in all countries under similar operations. And then you have collaboration even between the countries. For example, the Morocco-occupied Western Sahara, there's buses arriving there, and then they're handed out to the Mauritanian authorities. But then secondly, I think, is also the involvement of the Spanish officers in Mauritania. They're there at pretty much all steps of the operation, from supporting with equipment and boats, helicopters and intelligence, and even officers being involved in sea interceptions and the raids, to actually having access to the centers, entering the centers and taking photos and videos of the people detained, and then eventually receiving lists of the deportees.
So this is active involvement, not a case where they're funding a project and say they don't know what happened on the ground.
Exactly. Yeah, there's presence, there's knowledge, and people know about it, they're involved in it.
In your report, you mentioned systematic racial profiling. Can you provide examples or testimonies that highlight the nature of this profiling?
Of course. So we've interviewed dozens of people who are black-skinned, dark-skinned in Morocco and Mauritania, who told us that if they didn't speak Arabic or the Arabic dialect of each country, they'd get thrown into a bus immediately, detained and dumped without any due process or any opportunity to challenge that detention or arrest. Some said they even had residency permits, so they were legally in these countries and were not given the opportunity to source those permits and show them to the police. But I think the most revealing case and emblematic case of profiling is the case of the American citizen Timothy Hutt, who was present in Morocco. He stepped out of his Airbnb to run some errands, and then he was stopped, arrested, and dumped in a remote area in Morocco. Even though he was American, he was legally in the country. He didn't have his passport on him, so they just chose to dump him because he wasn't speaking the Moroccan Arabic dialect. And I think his case shows that it's not about the legal status of the people in the country, but it is about using racial profiling to arbitrarily arrest people and dump them if they are black skinned.
And what are the effects of these operations on the local people, for example, Mauritania?
Well, everyone knows about these operations. When you go and speak to people, no matter where on the street, everyone is aware that there's buses going around arresting people. If you don't have your papers, you risk being deported to Mali or to Senegal. I think last year we've also had the highest numbers of Mauritanians leaving the country to Europe, but also a lot of them to the US. And we heard of cases where Mauritanians who are intercepted and then detained, so intercepted by boat, they are detained as a way to deter and scare them from trying again. But they're soon released because, and they might face legal challenges. But otherwise, Mauritanian nationals are not subject to these dumps.
And what are the governments saying, both the European countries implicated in your reports, but also the African governments, their partners? What are they saying in response to your findings? So
Tunisia acknowledged that last summer, and the EU acknowledged that Tunisia was indeed dumping people at the borders. They said it was not them funding these operations and they had nothing to do with them, even though they did close a migration deal of 100 million with the Tunisian government. But we actually found cars gifted by European countries to Tunisia that were being used in these operations, and we managed to verify that with contracts and visual evidence. As for Morocco and Mauritania, we obtained UNHCR, Frontex, European Parliament documents addressed to the Commission in which they explicitly say and describe the operations and show concern about these operations. We also have inside sources in the EU who told us they are indeed aware of the operations. And yeah, as I said, in Mauritania, the Spanish were present there. They have 50 officers stationed in the country, and they directly fund the institution and the detention center that does these operations.
All right, we'll leave it there. Andrei Popoviciu, thank you very much for speaking to us. And we reached out to the European Commissioner for Home Affairs, Eva Johansson, and other commissioners to ask what they had to say about the accusations, but they were not willing to answer questions at this point in time. Now, Now, the EU's collaborations with African countries stem from wider plans to cut the inflow of irregular migration. But at the same time, Europe does have a shortage of workers. Germany, for example, needs over 200,000 people to fill the gap over the next 2 years. It's reaching out to foreign workers, including Kenyans. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz was in Kenya last year to discuss the plans with President William Ruto.
Germany would like to offer more organized and legal ways for all those who want to work in Germany. And at the same time, we want to put a halt to irregular migration. Doing so would create a win-win situation for all countries involved. We see great potential for skilled labor from Kenya orderly migrating into all kinds of parts of our economy.
It's expected the deal will be signed later this year, and some Kenyans are already preparing to take up jobs in Germany. DW's Felix Maringa met two hopefuls in the Kenyan town of Homa Bay.
Ready to hit the road, Millicent Atieno is training to be a bus driver. She's one of a handful of Kenyans taking part in a pilot project, hoping to get a job in Germany. In about 8 weeks, she expects to be licensed and work in Flensburg in the north of the country.
I'll be very happy that I'm going to drive in a different road in Germany, whereby there's no portals. There's no, in Kenya, like we have these borders. So I won't be like so much stressed, worrying that there's a border crashing to my side.
Stephen Sunday has been driving buses for a local school for the last 14 years, but he has to retrain as his driving license is not recognized in Germany. That's in addition to the usual bureaucratic hurdles faced by people coming to Europe. He says he's been dreaming of working in Germany for the past 10 years, and he's well aware that there will be other challenges.
I've heard about racism in Germany. I think there are a lot of blacks in Germany. And being there, it won't affect me so much because I have to adapt with that situation here. And I'm ready for that.
Germany's incoming bus drivers have also been picking up some vital skills.
Ich bin Ausländer und spreche nicht gut Deutsch.
Their teacher says there's more to it than just language.
Part of the things we've taught them are now the discipline, mannerisms, like a driver, how you are supposed to be very careful. So I have confidence not in their German language alone, but also in how to carry themselves while there. Even the cultures of the Germans, the food stuffs, the clothing, like we expect a lot of winter there.
Germany needs skilled workers, and it's turning to countries like Kenya to help. Agencies like Skillution, who are running this project, try and set the stage for a seamless transition into German society.
We do the visa appointments at the German embassy in Nairobi. We do from the German side, German governmental side, the preparations so they get quick their visa. The company in Germany, the bus company, is taking care of the accommodation in Germany for the first year. So they come to Germany, they have a house where they can move in, they can be there and they can take their living at least for a year.
Stephen Sunday is optimistic about what's ahead.
My hope is that I get a good working environment, I get good colleagues that I can work with, yes, and also to get something to help me help the people who are in need.
Sunday and Millicent have now signed their contracts and are looking forward to the new opportunity for them and their families.